Hello, everybody. This is Christopher Phillips, the founder of Socrates Cafe and the overarching Democracy Cafe nonprofit. I am blessed to have an exchange with my dear friend and brother, Cornel West. Cornel, thanks so much for taking the time to do this with me.
My brother, it is my blessing, and we go back over 13 magnificent years with golden memories and precious times with our families, and we are still here, a little grayer, little older, but also a little
Well,
wiser, little wiser, but we're
that's a
both still.
philosophical question. I'm not sure. According to my kids, I'm getting less wise as I get older.
No, 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 no. I can testify that you were very wise when I met you, and you're even wiser now. I'm telling you.
Well, you very kindly wrote the foreword to my book, Soul of Goodness, which you called sort of the Shakespearean tragedy that sprang from the mysterious death of my dad.
Yes.
And you and I had just had a soulful exchange, mystical exchange almost, when we're at Harvard. And you said, Brother Chris, is there anything I can do for you? And I was like floored. And I said, Well, I am writing a book. And you so kindly offered to write the foreword to it. And I'm forever grateful to you. But we have just been friends now for well over a decade, and it's just a true joy, a true joy. So, Cornell, you decided to run for president, and so you took sort of what I would call almost a Tocquevillian journey across the fruited plain of the United States. And I'm wondering what kind of insights you gained and gleaned about the state and straits, first of all, about democracy in America, before we go on and talk about international conditions of democracy. To have had that opportunity to really lock hearts and minds with people everywhere and you engage everybody, and everybody is equals, whether they agree or disagree. And what did you take away from that?
Well, one, I was deeply inspired by being able to meet so many wonderful people, all walks of life, every context. I started in Mississippi as a tribute to Fannie Lou Hamer in Lexington, Mississippi, there, and got the endorsement Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and then went on over to Brandon, a little small town where the Klan used to terrorize all the time, and then ended up in Jackson. And by the time I'd been through Utah and um, Georgia and South Carolina and New York and so many other places, man, I was just inspired, encouraged, and fired up. Now, at the same time, I did encounter massive spiritual decay, which is to say, a lot of people's sense of connection with others, sense of empathy for others was waning. A moral decrepitude, a sense that corruption had set in so pervasively, especially among the elites, but in the citizenry as a whole, that those wonderful people who I met often felt powerless. They often felt impotent. They could see the decay. They could almost feel the decrepitude, but they didn't really think they could do a whole lot about it.
Mm.
And that was one of the most disheartening features
Mm.
of the 17 months. I ran for 17 months. My God, almost 1,200 different
Mm.
interviews and six, 700 different lectures and things. So I had a great time. I really did. My cash flow stopped completely. If you run for president, you can't even have a job. Union could not pay me my salary because it would be viewed as a contribution to my campaign.
Union Theological Seminary.
God bless them. They wanted to, but they couldn't. So that you almost had to be a rich person in the country, even to run for office, because most of us just have regular jobs.
Well, that's
And
everything we do with our Democracy Cafe and Socrates Cafe is from the ground up. We do this inquiry in the trenches with the people.
right.
And do you, as impotent as everyday people across the board are feeling, or as duped as they're feeling in some ways by promises that turned out to be fool's gold rather than this true golden age of America? Do you
That's,
still take great hope and heart that somehow we the people can see our way through this, or is it bleaker than bleak?
I think it's always an open question. It really is. It's always an open question. I don't think any set of social circumstances fully dictate what we can do and what the possibilities are. I fundamentally believe that history is unpredictable, it's incomplete, it's unfinished, uh, uh, and it's open ended.
So
So
it's
we just
Shakespearean. A move here and a move there can turn things.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the creativity of human beings, the volition of persons, is always that factor or variable that you never have full control over. History doesn't. We don't at all. And that's something to hold on to. That's what the great Samuel Beckett, my vanilla blues man from Ireland, called perhaps. He said that's the most precious word in the English language.
Hmm.
Perhaps we just don't know. Perhaps we can, and that means there's always that door that's cracked open, no matter how small it is, no matter how big we think it is.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful.
It's real, very real. No, on the other hand, there is something that is constant, and that is the wretchedness of human beings in terms of our propensity toward hatred and greed and envy and resentment and putting others down, and even gratuitous violence we see too often in human history. That's a constant, that's recurrent in human history. But the moments of interruption, the moments of disruption, the moments of creating the kind of spaces to push back the hatred and the greed and the envy and the resentment, that's where love comes in. That's where deep friendships, that's where justice comes in. That's where democracy comes in. That's where what Karl Popper called open societies come in. You don't have open societies without love, without justice, without trust, without uh, uh, learning and listening from others with whom one disagrees, but still recognizing that we have to sustain community over time and space.
Well, as you know, I earned my doctorate degree at age 50. Got a teaching fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania. And the text that I chose as my principal text, you may have heard of him, is one called Democracy Matters by a then young man named Cornel West. And I actually quoted you in my dissertation, Cornell, and I want to read you just a little bit of what you said in Democracy Matters. West argues that in order to strengthen and evolve democracy today, we must embrace Socratic commitment to questioning of ourselves, of authority, of dogma, of parochialism, and fundamentalism. West believes that democracy cannot be had, much less revitalized, without this commitment, since Socratic questions what he believes most successfully serves to, quote, tease out those traditions that can best enable us to wrestle with difficult realities we often deny. Where is that tradition still alive and well? Because people don't seem to be. It takes time and effort and commitment to get down to the nitty gritty and look at what speaks for and against and rigorous methodical scrutiny. You can't do it in 10 minutes. You can't do it in sound bites.
No, that's true. That's true. No, I think that tradition is weak and feeble, but it's certainly still there. I mean, shoot, I just had a town hall meeting in Seattle and we packed the place and we engaged precisely with this kind of unleashing of Socratic energy, critical not just of the predatory capitalism and the vicious forms of white supremacy and male supremacy and anti Palestinian racism, anti Jewish racism, the homophobia and transphobia, but we talked about this both in forms of structures and institutions, but also the ways in which it's shot through ourselves. So we have to be self-critical. The Socratic moment is a crucial one, but we also have to have critiques of structures of domination and forms of oppression. And we have to resist, but resistance doesn't mean a whole lot if you don't have remembrance. And it
Mhm.
doesn't have a moral and spiritual dimension if you don't have deep love and care and concern and sensitivity to the suffering of others. Resistance is not some kind of empty slogan. It's got to be grounded and immersed in something that is real and concrete in people's lived experiences. And to the degree to which people are still responding, I think it's important. But, the powers that be, it's got mechanisms of repression with police, mechanisms of mendacity with lies, which is so much of the media and these days, the attacks on the universities and so many capitulating, and therefore it's hard to feel as if any kind of genuine education with that Socratic
Hmm.
spaces are being enacted. You see that? You don't want safe spaces because you have to be critical, but you don't want these authoritarian spaces where people can't raise serious issues because you don't want to be divisive. You don't want to be critical of America. You don't want to be cutting against the grain of Trump's, fascist policies and sensibilities and so forth. You say, well, wait a minute. If we want to talk about genocide in Gaza, we're going to talk about, well, you're hurting my feelings. Well, let's just have a debate. What's going on? How do we understand the nature of the suffering? Do
Hmm.
we identify with the Palestinian babies which we would probably identify with European babies or Israeli babies? Well, those Palestinian babies have exactly the same value as any baby in the world. Where's the moral outrage? How do we respond? I mean, that's what is needed. And the only way we can really respond to it is what you've done with your Socratic cafes, which is to enact it in deed and action, brother, and create community. You had to touch people, engage people.
Les, I've told you before, your book, The American Evasion of Philosophy, actually woke me up from my own dormancy. I know you don't feel like a lot of people read it, but it steered me towards basically everything I've done, starting with founding Socrates Cafe in 1996, almost in our 30th year, but recapturing that tradition, not just of naturalism and pragmatism, but about the underlying Socratic commitment to fomenting more open selves and societies, putting it on the line. Look what happened to Socrates. I mean,
Absolutely.
he didn't meet with a happy ending. And
Absolutely. No, that's very real. But also with your own deep Greek roots, which are so precious, where as great as Socrates was, he never cries, he never sheds a tear, which means that he's probably never loved anybody. Anybody who loves somebody is going to have tear-soaked moments in their lives. So that Socrates is a necessary, not sufficient condition. You have to have intellectual integrity, courage to raise deep questions, but you also have to have courage to weep, courage to cry. You have to be open to the ways in which the world will break your heart. And you see that in Antigone. You see it in Sophocles. So the Greeks do have it. You see it in Euripides. You see it in Aeschylus. And of course, the prophetic legacies of Jerusalem, you see it in Hebrew scripture. Jesus weeps and so forth. And the same is true in the blues and jazz. There ain't no blues and jazz without tears transfigured into sound. You know what I mean? So that what you do is use Socrates as a crucial starting point, which is so crucial, indispensable. And then it moves to these larger dimensions of what it is to be human. And you've done that for, my God, decade after decade after decade, my brother.
thank you, Cornell. The thing is, I actually take it as a compliment when somebody gets up and says, "You're not Socrates." I say, "No, I'm not. I was influenced by the Socratic tradition, but I was also influenced by my Yaya, who escaped her little island of Nisros in the South Aegean when Mussolini's fascists took it over. And she said, Christoforos, you need to be Socrates with a heart."
Yes, that's
And,
exactly right. Now, see, she already understood what I'm talking about back then. But it could be that the full story about Socrates is probably never told. Just like Jesus never laughs, and we know Jesus had a sense of mirth. They just didn't capture it. Socrates probably did cry. Xenophon says that Socrates had some tears, but Plato never has Socrates crying. But his marriage to Xanthippe, anybody been married know he got some tears. He got sons. Anybody got kids No, you got some tears. So Socrates may have had some tears that just didn't capture it in the narrative. And the fact that he never wrote a word for the most part. I mean, he wrote
Left it up to others.
some hymns and music in jail, but he never really wrote a text. Uh, uh, so that in that sense, we want to be open to the possibility that Socrates does have a deeper sense of what it is to have a heart and a soul and a laugh and they are not just tears, but also even intense laughter.
One of the things that I'm finding in my journeys across not just the fruited plain of America myself, is that many discourses are bereft of nuance, as if you can't be, can you be pro-Palestinian without being pro-Hamas? Can you be pro-Israeli without being pro-Netanyahu? Can you be both pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli at the same time? Really digging down deep and drilling into very difficult, nuanced questions without any easy answers or final answers. And I'm even finding it a challenge in Socrates Cafe. People almost seem ready if they say, if anybody says anything that pushes a button, to not give them the benefit of the doubt and to assume they're not operating from a position of sincerity. And so there's a lot of, as much of an uptick as there is in interest in our Socrates cafes and democracy cafes, there's also people are less and less inured to nuanced discourse.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's very true. Now, I think as the catastrophe intensifies, it could be nuclear, it could be ecological, it could be spiritual, it could be economic with the vast wealth inequality. It could be downright just imperial with U.S., funding what's happening in this genocidal attacks on these precious Palestinians. It could be ugly attacks on Jewish brothers and sisters in Pittsburgh, here in the States, and other parts of the world. That people are more in a state of panic, man. Once they get in a state of panic, they move toward paranoia, which is Manichaean. All the goods on my side, all the bads on the other side. No nuance, no complexity, no sense of overlap. And I think for you and I, it's just a matter of how do we remain pro-human? And pro-human always complicates things because you're going to
Always
keep.
easy to turn that critical lens on everybody, but to also have it redound on ourselves and understand our own faults and foibles, not as a way to just have humility as an end in itself, but to understand that, you know, we all are in this together and we all need each other to serve as gentle or even harsh mirrors so we can all be that change, because it's so easy to point the finger at him and him. That's why I started Socrates Cafe. I said, well, what about you, Chris? What are you doing? You know,
Mm,
now, how can
mm.
we all step up and stand up? No more so than for today's marginalized.
I mean, part of the challenge is that you get folk who are able to speak to certain crucial issues. Let's say, for example, working people's trade unions and what have you. But then you got these xenophobic elements that float around race or gender or what have you. And the question is, how do you keep track of both, all of those in one figure in one movement? But what it means, though, is that any movement that we're a part of, or any church, a mosque, a synagogue, a temple that we're a part of, and we're critical of the gangsterism that's taking place in high places, there's certain gangsterism within our own teams, within our own movements, within our own churches, our own mosques, our own synagogues. And that's a crucial one. So you're talking about that self-criticism,
Mm. Uh,
but the same is true in terms of clan group criticism, the tribalism that's difficult to push back, the parochialism and the nationalism. Oh, my country is always no. Your country might be a force for good here, but over here they are criminals. And it's that truth telling that Socrates, I think, exemplifies. And that truth telling is what Herbert Melville said: truth is a jagged edge. That's what he says in Billy Budd, probably the greatest short story in American literature that he wrote at the very end of his life when he was dying. It's a jagged edge, and therefore it cuts in a lot of different ways. And so you give up on truth. Well, you're not concerned about truth. It's all about power. It's just power, 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 power. It's Thrasymachus. over Socrates in Plato Republic. Socrates is a challenge to Thrasymachus' claim of might makes right. The power dictates morality. Well, we live in a world in which the gangsterization of the society and world and the thugification of the society and world just talks about power and crushes the weak and vulnerable no matter what. And you say, no, no, we come from a tradition where we in solidarity with the weak. I don't care who they are. If they're workers, if they're widows, if they're fatherless, if they're motherless, if they're black or indigenous or brown or Palestinian or Jewish or Arabs or Muslims. But there's also circumstances in which all of those groups can themselves become gangsters, you see. And that's part of the challenge. I mean, one of the problems around the Middle East is how could a Jewish people, a precious Jewish people, have been terrorized, traumatized, and hated for 2,500 years, do the similar things to another people? And how do you keep track of both those 2,500 years of being so viciously treated? And then you get your own nation state and you viciously treat some Palestinians. How do you keep track of it? Well, if you're pro human, you're not surprised because human beings have choices to make. They have choices. If they want to choose Einstein that says coexist with Palestinians and Arabs, or Jabotinsky that says dominate and annihilate. Those are choices human beings have, whether they're Jewish or any other ethnicity or any other gender or any other color or any other national identity. You know what I mean? And that's very much, I think, what the great Socratic and prophetic traditions try to highlight.
It's worrisome throughout human history, modern human history, that democratic mechanisms can actually be used to subvert.
Absolutely.
If you have a complicit, compliant Supreme Court and Congress, then basically you have a one branch executive, and that's it.
Exactly. Well, I mean, the great de Tocqueville, no, de Tocqueville is a French aristocrat. You're thinking, well, yeah, now we don't have high expectations of what he has to say about democracy. But he comes here to study the prison, so he's going to look at America from the bottom, through the lens of those at the bottom. And he came up with, one of the most dangerous things about American democracy is the tyranny of majority, because he knew it was a majority of Americans who would have voted to keep slavery going. It's a majority of Americans who supported Jim Crow. And they said, well, democracy is the will of the people. Well, no, the demos can be gangster too. There's got to be a moral and spiritual dimension that's beyond simply what the majority thinks. And when you look at it in that way, look at the Germans. It was a majority of Germans who supported the gangster Hitler, the thug Hitler. It was a majority of German churches. Thank God for Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who said no. I'm going,
Your chairmanship is
and that's the chair that's the very name that I have here at Union Seminary, and I'm very humbled to be the Dietrich Bonhoeffer professor. But he sets a high standard. You know what I mean? And so again, Socratic energy is a very dangerous thing. Most status quos do want the Socratic folk to drink the hemlock, or they want the prophetic folk to be crucified.
Yeah.
And when you look at
Very influenced
Socrates,
by Rabbi Heschel.
mm-hmm.
You're writing a book on Heschel, is that correct?
Well, God, I've been thinking about it and writing. I wrote a piece for Jewish Currents a couple of years ago for my dear brother Daniel May, who's the publisher. And after I wrote that piece, I said, Lord, have mercy. That piece might be
Oh,
my statement on Heschel for a while, because I'm locked into so many other things right now. I got to finish these Gifford lectures that I can be able to jazz soaked up.
congratulations, by the way, on that. I
Uh,
listened to
yeah.
all of your live lectures. I made
Did
sure
you took
every
time to do that, brother?
single one,
Oh,
and my whole family, Ceci, Callie, and Sibley too. Um, we
God
were
bless you.
No,
Uh,
it was very moving, and I thought it even had more resonance because you took time out of your presidential run, um, and I told my kids, I said, Cornell is wired in a way. You in the question and answer sessions, you just brought in so many traditions and engaged with people in this just gorgeous, stirring way. And I thought it was just kind of the space that we all needed. And so, yeah, I took the time to listen to all of your lectures live, and it was a very moving experience for the whole family.
That's so kind of you, though, man. Oh, 6 lectures, that's a lot of time in one's life.
Yes.
Very much so. But I'm finished. I mean, I'm done with those, so that I hope that they should be out pretty soon.
So,
Uh,
Cornell,
that,
in terms of the International Day of Democracy, and the fact that, we're all here for just such a little blip of time, and looking at some of the pernicious patterns that seem to be repeating themselves today that have led to rising tides of extremism, if we look at what's happened in the past, are you hopeful? Are you hopeful for us human beings, Homo sapiens, looking 10, 15, 500 years down the road? What do you think
I'm
about?
always a prisoner of hope, but I'm in no way optimistic. The species has deep self-destructive proclivities. There's no doubt about that.
Mhm.
The American Empire has deep self-destructive proclivities for itself, for its people, and for the world. But every major organizational effort to govern tends toward a certain kind of corruption because they don't want to be rendered accountable. And most of them really don't have a deep care and concern for the least of these, for poor people, for working people, for the wretched of the earth, in the language of the great Franz Fanon. That's why we have to be relentless, vigilant. We have to be forever, as Edward Said used to say, forever locked into an unstoppable predilection for alternatives, to authorize a better future.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it's guaranteed. Not at all. Not at all. But we do all that we can, and that's what we're called to do. We're called to bear witness.
Yes, I really salute you for that, Cornell. I know I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me, and for being on our advisory board for all these years now, and most of all for your friendship and undying support. I just send you bottomless, boundless love, as does my family. And I take great hope that people like you and Robbie George, like in your beautiful book, Truth Matters, can come together and show that people who don't see things differently can still love each other and have that Greek philia. And I think you both exemplify that. So I take hope in heart, just in
Well,
your.
brother, when you call, I come running. And as a Christian, I'm loving folk across the board through the dimness and the grimness, which makes absolutely no sense in the eyes of the world. It's foolish, it's folly, as Erasmus says. And yet at the same time, it's the most beautiful way of being in the world, though you tend to be on the road to crucifixion.
Cornell, thanks so much for the gift of your time.
Love you, brother.
Love you too.